It's July of 1833, and a wolf just walked into camp. The men bitten that night walked away certain they'd been lucky. They were wrong, and it wasn't the grizzly or the mountain lion that proved it. I've lived better than 50 years in the same high country where all 10 of these animals still roam. This is the real countdown of what actually killed mountain men more than winter ever did. And the last name on it will surprise you most. My name's Cole Hartwell. 50-some years is a long stretch to spend in one range of mountains, and I've spent 19 OF those winters completely alone in it. The kind of winter where nobody is coming if you get it wrong. I've guided better than 400 people through this same country, and I've been called out on more than 30 searches for folks who went missing in it. That's not a resume I'm reciting at you. 2 of those 30 searches ended with me digging a hole instead of building a fire. And that's not a thing a man forgets or gets to feel proud about. It's just the plain reason I've got a right to tell you what actually kills a man out here, instead of what just scares him. Here's what you're getting. 10 animals, counted down from 10 to 1. Every single one of them has a real claim to having killed more mountain men than the winter itself. Number 10. Start with the one everybody already picked. The grizzly was a trapper's worst fear, and it earned that fear honestly. Old accounts describe it as nearly impossible to kill, outright with the guns of the day. A single wounded bear coming on faster than a man could outrun a horse. Guns doing nothing but making the animal angrier. A black powder rifle in 1823 was slow to reload. Pour the powder, seat the ball, ram it home, prime the pan. That whole process could eat up 20 seconds or more, even for a man who'd done it 1,000 times with steady hands. A grizzly at a dead run covers that same stretch of ground in about 3. And a charge like that could close the distance before a man ever got a second shot ready. Which is exactly the kind of detail that turns a story into a legend. Hugh Glass is the name every mountain man knew. He was mauled so badly on the Grand River in 1823 that the men traveling with him figured he was finished and left him behind. Ribs laid open, a leg broken, a wound on his throat so deep the men with him figured he'd be dead before sundown. They took his rifle, they took his knife, and they left him a shallow grave they never bothered to finish digging, and he crawled and walked hundreds of miles back to find help anyway, setting his own broken leg, living on wild berries and whatever he could scavenge off a rotting buffalo carcass along the way. That story alone was enough to put a chill in every man who heard it repeated around a fire. It's the kind of story that gets bigger every time it's told. And by the time it reaches a green trapper's first winter out here, that grizzly isn't an animal anymore. It's a monster waiting behind every willow thicket. Here's the part that ought to stop you cold. A historian who went digging through every fur trade record he could find could only confirm 6 mountain men killed by a grizzly in the entire era. 6 deaths in 40 years across a stretch of country crawling with bears. Think on that number a minute. 40 years of trappers pushing into grizzly country every single season, sleeping on the ground in it, running trap lines through it, stumbling onto sows with cubs in it, and the whole documented body count comes to 6 MN. The fear was real. The body count wasn't. A grizzly up close is still a genuine threat to anybody. Make no mistake about that. I've had my own moments with that animal, and I won't stand here and tell you it isn't dangerous. It is. But dangerous and deadly aren't always the same word. But the animal that haunted every trapper's imagination turns out to be one of the rarest ways an actual trapper died. That's the pattern for this whole list, and it starts right here, with the biggest name of all, number 9. Now, here's an animal that hardly gets talked about, and there's a reason for that. A mountain lion hunts by staying completely unseen. It stalks. It waits. It strikes from behind, built to take down a deer without ever giving the deer a chance to see it coming. A cougar can drop from a ledge, onto the back of an animal 3 times its own weight and have it dead inside a minute, snapping the neck clean with 1 bite before the animal even knows it's under attack. On paper, that's more than enough animal to kill a grown man. In practice, it almost never happened. The reason comes down to what a cougar is actually built to hunt. A trapper moving with companions, carrying a rifle, often traveling with dogs, is a hard target for an animal whose whole strategy depends on picking off something smaller and alone. A cougar doesn't want a fight. It wants a guarantee. And a man standing upright, armed, surrounded by barking dogs and other armed men, is about as far from a guarantee as that animal is going to find in these mountains. The fur trade record backs this up. No run of cougar killings, no recurring body count anybody can point to. The ghost of the timber mostly stayed a ghost. Ambushing horses and dogs, staying clear of armed men who traveled in groups. I've tracked more mountain lion sign in 50 years than I could ever count. And in all that time I've had exactly 1 encounter close enough to call dangerous. And that cat ran the second it realized I'd seen it. Another fear that outran the facts, same as the bear. Number 8. This next one is where the list turns a corner. Because the rattlesnake actually did strike, and it actually did kill. It just did it slow. And it did it cheap. A man reaching into brush to gather firewood, or setting his hand down wrong near a den, could take a strike that would be a bad afternoon today, and a death sentence back then. No anti-venom, no doctor anywhere close. Sometimes help was hundreds of miles off in any direction. The venom breaks down tissue and messes with a man's blood, and modern medicine handles that just fine with the right treatment fast enough. Strip all of that away, and a bite to the hand could turn into days of swelling, dying flesh and infection that finished the job the venom started. The whole arm would go tight and hot first. Then the flesh right around the bite would start to die, and infection had all the time in the world to spread after that. There are accounts of trappers cutting into their own snake bites with a skinning knife, trying to bleed the poison back out before it could spread. Some of them lived, some of them just opened a second wound for the infection to work through, because nobody was coming to stop it. It had no claws to speak of, no size to brag about, and it still punched clean above its weight, because the real danger was never the snake. It was the total absence of anything to treat the bite with. Keep that in mind, because it's going to matter for nearly everything left on this list. Number 7. Now, back to where I opened. July of 1833, the Green River Rendezvous, and for 3 separate nights, rabid wolves walked straight into camp. It wasn't one wolf, it was several, over several nights, biting men where they lay by the fire. Men woke up to teeth in their arm, their leg, their face, dragged half out of their bedrolls before anybody could get a knife or a club into it. Between 2 camps, close to a dozen men got bitten, several of them straight on the face, walking away certain for a while that a scar was the worst thing they'd carry out of it. Here's the part that makes this different from every animal before it on this list. The wolf didn't have to win a fight at camp that night because the bite did its killing later, on a delay, and there was nothing anybody in 1833 could do once it started. One man broke down while out on a hunt, weeks after his bite had healed over, foaming at the mouth, gnashing his teeth, barking like the animal that bit him. And he still had enough sense left in him to warn his own friends to stay back before he wandered off alone to die. Another man made it all the way onto the trail back to St. Louis before the spasms took him. At least one confirmed death came out of that rendezvous, and it's one of the best documented animal deaths of the entire mountain man era, mostly because a man happened to be keeping a journal that week. Most animal deaths from this period left NO recorded at all. No journal, no ledger entry, just a man who went out on a hunt one season and never made it to the next rendezvous, and nobody left behind to write down why. A dozen men bitten in one single week at one single camp is the largest cluster of animal-caused injuries recorded anywhere in the fur trade era. It shows you exactly how a bite that looks like nothing can still be a death sentence with a fuse on it. Number 6. The animal that fed a mountain man could kill him too. And it mostly did it through the hunt itself, not through some unprovoked charge. The chase did the killing. Running buffalo on horseback meant a horse could go down at a dead gallop, throwing its rider into a stampede of animals that outweighed him by 1,000 pounds or more. A man thrown at full speed into that kind of herd doesn't get a second chance to stand back up. He gets trampled by the next dozen animals before the dust even settles. A wounded bull wheeling around mid-chase could gore or trample a man on foot before he ever got a second shot off. Understand how much animal you're actually dealing with here. Even the grizzly, the bear we just spent time cutting down to size, was known to hunt and bury its own bison kills, caching the meat the same way it would cache anything else too big to eat in one sitting. A bison wasn't hunting men the way a wolf or a cougar might. It didn't need to. A stampede doesn't slow down to sort out who's in its way, and a man on foot in the middle of one had about as much say in the matter as a fence post. The simple physics of a stampede or a gored fall didn't care whether the animal meant to hurt anybody or not, and that's a different kind of danger than everything else on this list so far. Number 5. Men out here train themselves to watch for teeth behind them, and in doing that, some of them miss the antlers right in front. A cornered bull elk or a bull moose in the rut is not the same animal you'd call prey the rest of the year. Not for those few weeks when everything in its body is built around holding ground or winning a mate. It's not prey anymore. It's a wall of muscle and bone, and it will use every bit of both to put a man on the ground. A bull moose in that state doesn't run from a man the way it would in October. It plants its feet, drops its head, and comes straight at whatever's closest. Man, horse, campfire, it doesn't much matter. This one doesn't come with a clean number attached, and I'm not going to hand you one that isn't there. What it comes with is a plain, well-understood pattern. A bull elk, or moose, in that season stops behaving like the animal you spent all day stalking. And more than one trapper learned that difference the hard way. Focused so hard on the predator behind him that he forgot the animal in front of him could kill him just as dead. I'll say this once and let it lie. Everything I've covered on this channel about frontier survival gathered in one place. That's the book on my website. I won't bring it up again in this video. If you want it, it's there. If you don't, no matter. Number 4. Here's an irony that'll sit with you a minute. The same animal that made a trapper's whole living, the one that fed him and paid off every debt he owed, could turn around and hurt him 2 entirely different ways without ever meaning to. Start with what its teeth can actually do. A beaver's front teeth never stop growing, kept razor sharp by gnawing, sometimes growing out close to an inch long. They can deliver a bite forceful enough to sever an artery. That's a real documented capability of the animal, and it's worth knowing plainly. I'll be straight with you though. There's exactly one confirmed case anywhere on record of a bite like that killing a grown man. And it happened in 2013, half a world away, to a fisherman who was posing for a photograph. There's no confirmed case anywhere in the fur trade record of a mountain man killed that way. So I won't sit here and tell you one existed just because it makes a better story. What that bite can do and what it's been proven to do to a trapper are 2 separate things, and I'd rather give you the honest one. The real risk ran through the water, not the teeth. Beavers are a documented carrier of the parasite behind what folks still call beaver fever, spread straight through the same streams a trapper drank from every single day. His whole living depended on getting his hands wet and his mouth close to that water. Over and over, season after season, wading into beaver ponds to check a trap line drinking straight from the same current without a second thought, because there was nothing else to drink and no way to boil water every single time. The animal that paid for everything he owned was, without meaning to be, one of the steadiest health hazards he faced. Number 3. Now here's the reveal I promised you. The animal the trapper trusted more than almost anything else he owned shows up over and over in the real record of what hurt and killed these men. Sitting right alongside bears and blizzards, not somewhere below them. The ways it happened were about as ordinary as danger gets. A kick from a spooked animal could do it. A hard throw onto rocky ground could do it. A boot could catch in a stirrup and drag a man behind a horse that didn't know or care what it was dragging, over rocks and roots. For as long as it took the animal to settle down, or the man to come loose, none of that required a vicious animal or a freak accident. It just required an ordinary day of work with an animal that outweighs a man by half a ton. Boring is what surviving actually looks like, with no doctor for hundreds of miles and no way to set a bad break right. An injury that would cost you a cast, and 6 weeks today could cost a man his life back then. A broken leg out here didn't just mean pain. It meant a man couldn't ride, couldn't run a trap line, couldn't outrun weather or a hungry animal. It meant becoming a burden his own party might not be able to carry, simply because his whole survival depended on a body that still worked. There's no single dramatic story behind this one, the way there is with Hugh Glass and his grizzly. It shows up again and again in the record for the plainest reason there is. It kept happening. Number 2. From the animal a man trusted to the bite he never even felt happen. Frontier folks called it mountain fever, a bite too small to notice that turned into a slow, confusing sickness with no clear cause anybody could point to. No claws, no teeth you'd feel. Just a man getting sicker by the day for reasons nobody around him understood. I want to be careful with you here, because this is where it's easy to overclaim. Historians today connect that old mountain fever to a tick-borne illness, something like Rocky Mountain spotted fever. That's a guess, not a fact. That disease itself wasn't identified or given a name until decades after the mountain man era had already ended, and the tick that carries it wasn't confirmed until years after that. So what you're hearing is a modern guess laid over an old mystery, not something anybody in 1830 could have dear-nosed. Call it what it likely was, not what anybody back then actually knew it to be. What made this one so dangerous wasn't its size. It was that an illness with no visible cause and no name yet gave a man nothing to fight back against, not the way a snake or a bear at least gave him a fighting chance. Number 1. Here it is, the smallest animal on this entire list. The one most men brushed off their arm without a second thought, carried the biggest body count of any animal named so far. Mosquitoes spread malaria, what the frontier called fever and ague, straight through the river valleys and drainages where mountain men worked all season and slept every single night. It didn't hit once and let a man go. It came back in waves. Chills one day, a burning fever the next, wearing a man down cycle after cycle until his body just gave out, or some other sickness finished what the fever started. The trade itself helped carry that disease into new country. Fur trade brigades moving through the Pacific Northwest around 1830 carried malaria into the Columbia and Willamette River valleys, and it swept through the people living and working in that country over the next several years, trappers included. That's not a rumor passed around a rendezvous fire. That's brigades carrying the disease with them from one river valley to the next, into a life built entirely around those same river valleys and drainages. Sit with that for a second. A man could stand off a grizzly bear. He could survive a full blizzard. He could take a rattlesnake bite and somehow live through the infection that followed, and still walk away telling the story at a rendezvous fire a year later. and then he could go down to something small enough to crush between 2 fingers without even noticing he'd done it. This is the one I told you to keep in your back pocket, because it flips everything before it. Every animal on this list except this one got its reputation from being loud, from having teeth or claws, or a story men could tell around a fire. The mosquito never got any of that credit, and it did more killing than all 9 of them combined. Fear that goes to the wrong target doesn't just waste your worry. It leaves you standing wide open for the thing that was actually going to get you the whole time. I'm not guessing at any of this. I paid for it. Campfire stories keep the dramatic deaths alive for generations. A bear mauling gets told and retold for 100 years. A man who quietly took sick from a mosquito bite gets a line in a company ledger, and nothing else. That's exactly backward from how you ought to spend your fear out here. And it was just as backward back when these 10 animals were the only danger a man had to weigh against the winter itself. Watch the water you drink. Watch the bugs you swat without thinking twice. Watch the horse under you doing something as ordinary as walking downhill. Watch the bite you never even felt land, not just the tracks that look like teeth. Tell me down in the comments if anybody in your family passed down the story about which animal they taught you to fear most out here, because I'd bet money it doesn't hold up any better than the grizzly did. Next time, I'll walk you through how the old hands actually judged real danger from exaggerated danger in the field, reading fresh sign right, judging wind and distance, knowing when a charge is a bluff and when it isn't, and what actually worked against every single animal on this list. If you want more of this, subscribe and follow along. Until then, watch what's quiet, fare what's small.